But the conflict as we know it right now will end because at a certain point, Israel, look, they're balancing their operational requirements and sort of the knowledge that this can't stand, right? They can't allow it to happen again, certainly. So they're balancing their operational requirements and their tactics with the international pressure, to stop at some point. And again, they have to make that decision.
Hello again, and welcome to This Week Explained bonus conversation series, Insightful Inquiries. We took a bit of a hiatus, but now we're back and ready to delve into the critical issues shaping our world today. As you can tell from the voice you're hearing, this is Kervin. We have a truly special episode in store for you. This month, we invited Mike Baker back to the podcast. He's a former covert field operations officer for the Central Intelligence Agency, chairman and CEO of the Portman Group, and you also may recognize him as the current host of the President's Daily Brief podcast. He brings a unique perspective and years of experience to our conversation. This episode is going to dive into all the geopolitical events over the past few months, from the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict to the challenges of trust within the intelligence community and the national security implications of our internal divisiveness. We'll also be exploring China's plans for Taiwan, which is a topic of great concern on the global stage. So buckle up for a thought-provoking and insightful conversation. All right, welcome back. The host of the #1 podcast and news commentary on Spotify, Mike Baker. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Thank you. Say, we're getting right to the heart of the matter with the plug for the President's Daily Brief. I appreciate that. So,
a 2-time daily listen for me because I do the morning and the afternoon. So it's
that's
just big
fantastic.
content.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I got news yesterday. The folks who run the show sent me a note saying that we're number 4 on Spotify overall. So it's
oh wow.
The rankings that they had were Trevor Noah, then Joe Rogan, and that seems out of whack because Joe should be up top all the time. And then Travis and his brother, Jordan Kelsey.
The Kelsey brothers.
And then the PDB, then the President's Daily Brief, and then Theo Vaughn.
So, you're beating the Swifties. Or you should be.
Coming up fast on the Swifties. I think if I might just, once Taylor sees that I've overtaken Travis, she'll probably dump him. And then, undoubtedly, she's going to start pestering me. So,
stay away. She's got another album coming up, I think. Yeah,
yeah, man.
Mike, it's good to have you on, man, because the world's crazy right now.
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on. Yeah,
it's just a few. And our audience is very, very much a geopolitics, intelligence-based podcast. So you're the perfect guest to break all this down because they hear me droning.
So you don't want to talk about Taylor Swift anymore?
So we can't. You want to get into Taylor Swift and why the Swifties are taking us into World War III? We can have that conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so Travis knows, I do not want to get into Taylor Swift. So I'm just making that point so he doesn't come after me.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you a Chiefs fan at all?
You know what? I am not. I'm a Giants fan, and I live with disappointment.
Wow.
But it's okay.
They've got a good mobster at quarterback now, so that's good.
So he lives in his mom's basement. I know, it's a pretty good story. So anyway,
but yeah, we'll kick it right off with let's start with Israel-Hamas, and since I know it's been a while. It's been over a month. We're going on 2 months in a couple weeks, but what was your initial reaction?
Well, there's a lot of parts there, but first and foremost, which is what everybody focused on, in the immediate aftermath, and by that I mean the evening of the day it happened, was the intelligence failure. Oh my God, how could this happen? Right? Well, that's a complex question. We can go into that. The reality is it happened, and it was an intelligence failure. But the next part of it was just the sheer brutality of it. We're used to seeing some medieval behavior from ISIS and some others, and so we shouldn't be shocked necessarily. But just the sheer scale of it all and its brutality was just god awful, right? And then the kind of the next part was, I mean, if you've been dealing with Middle East terrorism, in particular, if you've been dealing with the question of Hamas and Israel for any period of time, you knew where this was going to go. You knew that as soon as Israel started to respond, and you had some dead Palestinian civilians, that the narrative would change almost immediately to condemnation of Israel. Right. So, but the reality is it changed even faster than I think any of us thought it would, right? Because it was such an awful slaughter. And they took all those hostages, including little kids and babies, right? And you thought, okay, well, they'll give Israel a bit of time, to do what they need to do, which is degrade or, destroy Hamas. Well, it moved very quickly and probably even faster than Hamas expected, right? Hamas knows what they're expecting. They know they were going to get this narrative. And that's why they embed themselves with civilians, because they expect dead civilians and they count on dead civilians. I hate to say that, but there's no other way to put it, right? That's their currency. And so I think they were probably surprised at how quickly the international community started pounding on Israel, saying, "Oh my God, look what you're doing." So that was the next part, and now it's just a matter of, when you look at the situation, you think, okay, now Israel does have to make a decision at a certain point, and only they can make that decision, right? They're on the ground there; they've got the best intelligence at this point. Only they can make the decision as to when they feel they've degraded Hamas to the point where Hamas can not again govern Gaza and cannot conduct terrorist activities like this again. Because, believe them at their word, Hamas said they will do this over and over again. So, that is about all you need to know about Hamas, and all you need to know about how the Israeli government feels about what their objective has to be.
Yeah, and so for me, the really interesting thing is, like you said, how quickly the narrative changed, but that the narrative then became resistance by all means, meaning, well, what Hamas did, as tragic as it was required because you have a colonialist Zionist nation that's looking to carry out a genocide on an entire Palestinian population, race, the entire Arab world. And so it got in my head thinking, as an intel guy, going, who's running this information operation campaign? And it sounded a lot like, my initial reaction was, well, it's probably Iranian because they're an Iranian proxy. But looking at the narrative and then seeing the narrative being posted by very similar account, or by the same accounts that are promoting Russian narratives for the war in Ukraine, that got me thinking, well, could this be some sort of ploy by Russia to get Israel and Hamas involved, get everybody off of the Russia-Ukraine track, and maybe that pushes Zelensky to the table, gets a peace deal, and Putin can then have that sliver of land he says he took back for Russia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the answer is probably it's all of the above. Look, Iran, and Hamas has been very capable of this, and they've got their own disinformation, operation that pushes out what they want to push, and then kind of works to suppress pro-Israel narratives. The Iranian regime does the same. They're very active in that, and they direct most of what Hamas does. Look, Hamas wouldn't exist without Iran. But the answer is that also, yes, the Russian, apparatus is doing this. The Chinese regime's apparatus is doing it through their incredibly well-resourced disinformation operations. So they're all doing it. They're all pushing the same narrative because it ultimately, comes back to U.S. support for Israel, and anything we can do to denigrate Israel and the U.S. That's, from the Russian perspective, the Chinese perspective, the Iranian and their toadies, the Hamas, that's a good thing. So they're all in there, right, pushing and amplifying messages and supporting anti-Israel messages. They're all in there pushing and suppressing pro-Israeli comment. And people, they know what they're going to get, right? All those people operating those disinformation campaigns, no, they've they've got a bottomless well of useful idiots out there, who are just looking for a reason to go out on the street. Some of them just love a good time and want to get out and protest.
Right.
A lot of them couldn't find Gaza on a map if you opened it up to a map of Gaza, circled it with a Sharpie. So they know what they're going to get. Again, I think they're probably surprised at the speed with which it turned, but they knew they could anticipate, and they knew they could count on that happening.
Yeah. So then, from a Mike Baker perspective, what's the end game? Where do you see this ending, if at all?
Well, it'll end, right? This conflict. And by that I mean we're not going to. It's not going to end with a peace deal and happiness and sunshine in the region. But the conflict, as we know it right now, will end because at a certain point, Israel, they're balancing their operational requirements and sort of the knowledge that this can't stand, right? They can't allow it to happen again, certainly. So they're balancing their operational requirements and their tactics with the international pressure, to stop at some point. And again, they have to make that decision, but they're calculating that now, even as we speak. At what point have we degraded them enough, right? And there's a lot of moving parts there because it's not just, from a tactical perspective, have we taken care of the Hamas command structure, and have we killed enough of their fighters? Have we denigrated them so badly? But they've also got to worry about, okay, what backfills it, right? And the answer is not the UN. UN's completely useless.
Well, the UN's come out pretty much pro-Palestine.
Yeah,
they are in agreement that basically Israel should not exist, and Palestine should the Palestinians should take over.
Well, look, Iran now chairs a UN human rights forum. I mean, think about it.
Not an oxymoron.
Think about how insane that is, right? I mean,
yeah,
actually insane that Putin has waged war on Ukraine and has just set up this meat grinder out in Ukraine, and Russia still sits on the permanent Security Council, right? I mean, there's a lot.
I believe they were president of the Security Council as they were in Ukraine
position, and yet they they don't actually have to do that. They could say, what, we're putting you on hiatus right now,
right?
But the fact that they're okay with Iran chairing a human rights forum of all things, right, is insane, and that's kind of all you need to know about the UN. So the UN, the idea that they would be the ones who govern Gaza or somehow, sane people look at that and go, well, that's not going to work, right? I mean, you have members of the UN Refugee Office celebrating what took place on the 7th of October, staffers, right? So then the question is, okay, now what? The U.S. is pushing for the Palestinian Authority, right, under Mahmoud Abbas to kind of unite, and look, Hamas, violently, chucked the PA out of Gaza back in 6 or 7. And, there's a lot of animosity, right?
Yeah, Abbas stopped elections because he knew, Hamas at the time had 70% support within Palestine.
Yeah. But if you look at the numbers now, I mean, and you always have to take every poll out in that region with a grain of salt.
Right.
But it's not like Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, have overwhelming support from the population, right? I mean, there's a lot of people in Gaza who are like, exactly what has Hamas done for us, ever since they took over, right? It's been, at this point, that's new math for me, but 17 years or so of governing, they've done absolutely nothing for the people of Gaza in terms of bettering their lives, right? Meanwhile, members of Hamas are living the good life and, have squirreled away billions in their personal bank accounts, siphoned off from money intended for the betterment of the Palestinian people. So there's a lot of complexity when you say who's going to take over once this conflict ends. And Israel doesn't want a long-term occupation. They've got no interest in that. That's why the hell they got out 17 years ago.
Right.
But you got to have a reasonable alternative to that. And it's not in the U.S. administrations. It's not up to the U.S. administration to say, no, you can't occupy. No, temporarily, they're going to have to ensure the stability and peace while somebody comes up with an appropriate, likely two-state solution that everybody can accept.
But do you think the Palestinians ever truly accept a two-state solution? Because I believe that was Egypt's concern about taking in Palestinian refugees. They had some issues with...
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question. I think the Arab world has done very little to help the Palestinians. I think the Arab world has used the Palestinian problem to, their own advantage and for their own purposes over the years. The Arab world unanimously, condemned the idea of a two-state solution the last time it was proposed. So I think, it's a good question. Who's going to accept it? Because if you accept that two-state solution, then you're saying Israel has the right to exist. And then over the top of all of that, you've got Iran, who will never allow that, right? They'll never, right. Iran, at least the regime, I'm not talking about the Iranian people, the Iranian regime, they're never going to get themselves to a point where they go, oh, right, you're right. Israel has a right to exist, right? Yeah. They're always going to be looking to shit on this problem.
Right. So then why doesn't Israel do their own information operation campaign? They're kind of doing that right now, showing the videos of Hamas tunnels. And even that's kind of getting some pushback from a lot of people because they believe what Hamas says. Hamas says those are not tunnels. And then you have Al Jazeera that's just, parroting what Hamas is telling it. Quite honestly, every media source I've been reading has parroted what Hamas is saying, whether it's numbers of those killed in Gaza.
Right.
So how does Israel, if you were at the head of Mossad or the Israeli government,
and who's to say that I'm not?
Okay. I wasn't gonna force you to answer it. So we also know that you're the one that's collecting on Joe Rogan for the United States. So that we can get information from him to push a narrative.
Yeah, that's always my favorite, right? I always get like the wild-eyed ones after an appearance with Joe. But it's like, oh my God, it's that fucking CIA handler again. It's whatever makes you happy, fella. But you know what? Look, going back to your question, and how the narrative is played out, and who's supported Hamas. You remember a few days after that incredibly brutal slaughter on the 7th of October. A few days later, right, there was that explosion, at the
hospital.
And Hamas says, Israel is targeting hospitals and with airstrikes, and they've killed, over 500 people. There was no fact check by major Western and U.S. outlets, media sites. They New York Times, they just ran with what Hamas told them. Despite Hamas having just finished beheading and killing, what they did was god-awful, right?
Oh, by the way, at the same time, they were taking Hamas at their word that they didn't do it.
Yes.
We didn't behead babies. We didn't do that. And then video evidence came out, and do not try to go find that. I would not want to talk to the person that would want to go out and see those videos.
Yeah. I know. It is, and so, hey, at least Hamas did the world a favor by videoing their own with their body cams and their phones, videoing their own brutality. So, at least there was a sort of an acceptance after that, right? That, oh, well, all right, maybe they did that. But then to your point, people were like, wow, but still, right? Obama, in a very sophisticated and very dangerous way, because he likes to, act like he's, very sophisticated and understand. People like Rashida Tlaib going out there and screaming and being somewhat hysterical about things. People expect that, right? And so
it's a Palestinian.
Yes, and you can understand. Okay, yeah, that's fine. I'd rather you not be in the U.S. Congress, but okay, you're going to do that. But it's not eloquent, and it's not subversive in a sense because it's right in your face, right? What President Obama does, where he talks about it, and then he talks about this moral equivalency, but he says, well, but they're in an unbearable situation, the Palestinians. So when he says, oh, this is horrible what they did, but they're in this unbearable situation. Right? And then he does this, and then everybody goes, ooh, it's very sophisticated. Right? And yes, he's right, and it's unbearable. So therefore, like you said, it's almost like through any means, right?
Yeah.
So what he does, I think, is actually worse because it gives people justification from like this high-level, sophisticated source. So I don't know where the hell I was going with that. But yeah, I think. To your point with Mossad, What would you do? Run their own effort. They've got their own effort to try to get out there to identify disinformation, to discredit disinformation, to do what they can to get their message out, right? And, they understand they got a PR problem right now. I hate to put it that way, but it's a public relations issue. They understand they've got to be as transparent as possible with what they find in these tunnels. I don't know how much more evidence people need to know over all these years of the tunnel networks used and built by Hamas, again, using money that was supposed to go to clean water projects and building schools for the people of Palestine. But anyway, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's a shit show.
Yeah, that's the word. That would be the term that we use here. And then I just had something in my head and it just really cleared. I've got to get the
age.
Got those
age.
Yeah. Well, I did pick up the the brain pills that Rogan's been peddling.
Yeah,
those are doing good.
Yeah. No, I've heard. I've since that show, I've talked to a handful of folks who said, "Man, I use those. Works great. Neurogum and all the other things that he's talking about." So, maybe I'll substitute some of that gin in my martinis and try that instead.
You could do both. I always say two things can be true at the same time. You can do both of those. We'll see where that takes all of us. No, but what I wanted to get at was, so we've got Israel and Hamas going at each other. Hamas is an Iranian proxy. They are. I don't care that the majority of countries do not consider them a terrorist organization. When you cross the border and you terrorize people, you are a terrorist organization. But now Israel's fighting that, and then they're also taking pot shots from Hezbollah in the north, from Lebanon, and now the Houthis in Yemen have decided to start firing rockets, drones, and this week they decided, any Israeli-owned anything can be taken, and so they actually went and took I believe it's a UK-based but Japanese-run container ship, and
it's under a Bahamian flag.
Yeah, Israel says it's not theirs.
Right, they say it's not theirs. Now the problem with shipping is very obtuse. Right, what I mean by that is, the registries of ships it's a real maze of flagged vessels and obtuse ownership and everything. So, the Associated Press came out and said, well, we looked at public databases and, we think it traces back to a billionaire, an Israeli billionaire. Now, that may be true. It may not be. It may be old data because, we've done a lot of my company has done a lot of fraud investigations in the shipping industry. There's a lot of fraud in shipping.
Yeah.
And so there's every chance that it is actually British owned. There's also a chance that it is got some ownership or comes back to this Israeli cat. But point being, to your point, look, since 17 October, there have been over 60 drone and missile strikes on U.S. personnel and facilities by, a variety of militants. But what they've got in common is that they're all basically Iranian control. So we keep coming back to this same problem, which is the Iranian regime. Again, not the people. Great culture, great history, great people. They've been under the thumb of the Iranian regime for way too long. And at some point, we're going to have to figure out a deterrence plan, right? Because we've had 3 counterstrikes against them and hasn't done nothing to deter these attacks.
Yeah, so how does what the Houthis did with a container ship not escalate things? I mean, you've got Japan coming out and saying, we want to talk with the Houthis to try to get the container ship back. We want to kind of have mediation with them.
It's old enough. I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm old enough to remember when you take over a container ship and we send special forces out and to try to destroy your entire leadership.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. So we got some noise now. We've got some construction going on outside.
So it adds to the mystique.
Outside the compound. Yeah. The piracy was a big issue in the Gulf of Aden a few years back. And shipping lines had to figure out how to deal with it. Most of them opted not for violence. Most of them opted not to. They just thought, well, we'll come up with something better, or we'll just let it happen because it's cheaper than switching routes. So the shipping industry is kind of fascinating. But look, there were 25 crewmen on this vessel, none of them Israeli. It's again, Bahamian flag and operated by I think it's NYK Line, Japanese company. And but the worrisome part here is the Houthi militants who have taken those 25 crewmen now. They said, look, we're going to keep targeting any Israeli ships or any ships of countries that support Israel, right? Which, if by definition broadens this out. So yes, they've escalated the situation. Again, Houthi militants being, under the basically an Iranian proxy. And the fact that they lowered their team onto the vessel by helicopter, look, undoubtedly these same militants learned how to do that, how to fast rope down on the top of a vessel from, training inside Iran, right, from the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. So at some point, we're going to have to deal in some fashion, either by just putting our boot on their neck in terms of sanctions or something else with the Iranian regime, because you're never going to get stability and peace out there. And quite frankly, there are a number of Arab countries that would be happy to see that Iranian regime gone at some point, right? And
yeah, no doubt.
So I just don't understand how, the White House currently is just, I get it, right? They're doing everything possible to not have to blame Iran in any meaningful way. But that tap dance is starting to get a little tired, right? Because everybody knows who's responsible, and we're not dealing with the bully, right?
Right.
Nothing we've done yet is deterrence. Every time we do a strike against a weapons depot in eastern Syria, and we've only done 3, we think, well, that'll teach them. And then the next day, there's another drone or missile attack. So they don't believe we have the stones, and again, you don't want, again, it's always say, wow, he's warmongering. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you, fine. You want everlasting instability and terrorism and violence out in the Middle East? Great. Don't deal with the Iranian regime in some meaningful way. But we could certainly freeze them out in terms of sanctions. We could certainly make the coffers dry. Right?
So it's not good to open up $10 billion to Iran for humanitarian purposes.
Yeah,
Mike, I'm a humanitarian guy.
Yeah.
I like humanitarian things. So that seems like a good thing to me.
Yeah. You know what? When they announced that they'd extended the sanctions waiver, and by definition they were going to release that $10 billion the other day in frozen assets that were sitting in Iraq. Look, it's for electricity pay. And then John Kirby rolls out that tired line of, well, it's only for humanitarian aid. We're going to have absolute control on this. And it's the stupidest logic you could ever come across. Again, as I
love your analogy for this.
I don't even remember what that was.
Oh, it's your $6 billion or $10 billion for beer.
Oh yeah. No, it's true though. If I'm going to spend $10 billion, or if you tell me here, look, here's $10 billion, right? You can only spend it on whatever, beer and wings. Great. That's what I'll do. And then I'll take $10 billion over here that I was going to spend on beer and wings, and I'm going to spend it on ammunition and rocket launchers and training for my proxy groups. It's such a stupid notion, and it kind of shows you that the administration thinks Americans are just idiots, right? Or that we're just not curious, or we're not going to think about it, or we're so busy trying to put gas in the tank that we're not going to sit and think, well, that's a dumb concept, right? So I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go as far as the White House is with sanctions. They got to get serious though at some point. We got to dry their revenues up and make them at least feel the pain there, right? Because clearly the administration's, and nobody's keen to say, okay, we're going to, fire a couple of rockets at a Iranian military facility inside Iran. Okay, fine. Yeah, I get that. You don't want to escalate, but there are things we could be doing that would make a difference. It's kind of like with Russia. Russia's still got the ability to fight that war because we've never really sanctioned their energy industry.
Right.
And the minor steps we've taken, they're smart enough to get around. And they're getting around it with the benefit or the help of North Korea and China, Iran.
Right. And Russia played it smart because leading up to it, they allowed, so they wanted to provide energy to all of Europe. And they set up all those parameters for energy to Europe. And so those countries could not sanction the energy infrastructure of Russia because that would be harmful for their own people.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to dry up your own energy supply going into winter, right?
Right.
The Russians are smart enough. They started buying up tankers and setting up their own fleets in order to get around sanctions. And they know how to do this. And we don't. Again, I go back to what John Kirby keeps saying. Every dollar. Look, the government can't organize panic in a doomed submarine, right? They can barely figure out how to work the IRS. You think we're going to make that happen? Overseas with billions of dollars. In the obtuse world of international finance, it's just it is surprising that they think we're that stupid. But anyway, point being, I'm not a buyer on that idea that this 10 billion, and it also was a terrible political optic. Right? They knew they got their ass kicked for that 6 billion that they previously got froze, and now somebody's walking around the White House thinking, you know what? I bet will make the Iranian regime stop their attacks on us if we give them $10 billion.
Well, I didn't believe that they did it when I first saw the reports. It was mainly right-wing. And when I say right-wing, I just mean, more conservative news.
I thought it was a spoof. Yeah.
Yeah. And no, they did it. So then, speaking of smart people, let's counter the smart people, because the Biden administration, not that I think even Joe Biden wants to be president anymore. I think he could just go into a room by himself and he'd be very happy.
Yeah.
But the Biden administration, the powers that be, the money that's behind it, they're taking a hit right now for the support of Israel. And so what they see is, hey, we have a lot of problems, even with our own staffers who are sending text messages out about how they are funding genocide in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. So do you really think that's just public stuff that's being put out, or are those same conversations having in private? Because I would see it from this perspective. He's the Democratic nominee. I mean, unless something happens, he's the Democratic nominee. He doesn't have to play to a base, and that pro-Palestine or even pro-Hamas base is very left-leaning, very progressive. So he can keep promoting Israel and get elected if he continues down that path, because when you come to the presidency, you're going to look for those independents. And I would say somebody who's an independent, they are highly in favor of continuing to support Israel. Hamas has a 1% support among all American citizens. So I'm getting to a question here, Mike. Stick with me for a second. So then why not continue the support for Israel publicly and say, hey, I forget about those. We don't have to be Trump. We don't have to play to the base to get elected. We can sort of play to the independents and come out on top of all of this.
Yeah, I'd like to think that they're that smart, calculating. Maybe they are. Democrats tend to be pretty good at political messaging. They stick together anyway. But I think that they do look at the poll numbers in the Arab American community and the young, vote, and they see a problem, right? And I think they saw that, and you started to see a bit of a shift from the White House, where they were really working this delicate dance of saying we unequivocally support Israel, but we also believe there should be a 3-day pause or something. I mean, so they were
right.
And we detest the loss of. Of course, everybody detests the loss of civilian life. What a stupid thing to say. I mean, except for Hamas, but So yeah, I think that what they're worried about most. I mean, obviously, the Arab American vote is important in a place like Michigan, right? A swing state there. But I think that the youth vote is the part of it, the equation that they're really busy trying to figure out and calculate. And just how long can they walk this line? I mean, they're putting a lot of pressure on Israel. And I suspect a lot of what they're doing, which appears to be foreign policy, well, they're talking to Israel, they're doing this, is driven by this domestic political concern over here about the election in 2024. It's a bad thing to do. Driving your foreign policy based on your own domestic political concerns is probably not in the best interests of the country as a whole. So I think that, you're probably right. I keep thinking that it's insane that the party would nominate, either party would nominate somebody who's going to be 82 in November, in the elections. So 82 years old, right? But they, unless they can figure out a way to elegantly clear the decks of Biden and Harris, right? Because they won't let her rise to the top of the ticket, I don't think.
Do you think she stays as VP?
I think she'll stay as VP if he stays and runs. They can't. What are they going to do? Move her up? They can't move her up. They're in a position, right, where I think that whatever they do, they've either got him or they figure out some clever way, or he steps down, right? In my mind, the ideal thing for 2024 would be if Biden would say, we're going to, we're moving off. And they agree to somehow maybe Harris gets, if the Democrats win, she gets some cap position or something. And not that she's qualified, but still, but they do something like that. And then Trump over on the other side would say, for the good of the country, and I know that's never going to happen, but, I'm going to step down and it's time for a new generation, right? Just put it that. But neither of those things is going to happen.
No.
So we're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. We're getting the same situation in 2024 as we had before. Nobody's happy with it. If you believe any of the polls, nobody's happy with the two candidates. Right? I mean, okay,
since 2016,
except the base, right? They don't have the base. I mean, on both sides. Look, I full disclosure, I'm a centrist Republican, right? I like border control, I like fiscal responsibility, I like national security, right? But then just stay the hell out of everybody's kitchen.
Yeah,
I don't need to celebrate you. You don't need to celebrate me. I don't need to tell you what to do with yourself. You don't need to tell me, right? But do the things you're supposed to do as a government. Protect your citizens, have a controlled border like every other nation does out there. How about some fiscal responsibility and by God, worry about national security in an important way. But anyway, that's just, yeah.
Well, Mike, I'm in D.C. I can tell you.
Soapbox now.
I can tell you fiscal responsibility is not a term used in D.C. a lot. So I'm sure you know that already.
None of that's happening. You're right. It's absolutely true.
But there is another guy that the Democrats could promote up, and he's got a lot of good press in the last week. He was part of the Xi Biden summit, and I'm talking about the one and only, the beautiful Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, he's kind of taken over from Beto O'Rourke as the new darling, right, of some folks in the Democrat Party. He's got good hair. Look, the guy down in Argentina just won, and he was known for his hair. So
there you go.
Maybe it's a thing.
He can make a push. I do think he is trying to, so especially with the Biden G summit, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that after I shit on Gavin Newsom a little bit more. A guy that went on a national press conference and said, yeah, we cleaned up the streets of San Francisco. That's what you do whenever somebody comes to your house. You can keep it dirty all you want, but when they come to your house, clean it up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why wouldn't you? No, I know he was unabashedly, at least I guess you could say he was honest about it, right?
Yeah.
People were saying, you're just doing this because of the Communist Party leaders coming to town. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Couldn't be bothered before. And who knows where the hell they swept all those homeless people to.
I don't even want to think about it, Mike.
Yeah, no, I mean, somehow but this is the world we live in. They're looking at Gavin Newsom and saying, yeah, he's our backup plan, right? And he's done a terrible job, first in San Francisco, then in the state of California. Yeah. And yet he's supposed, now here's the caveat to saying that Biden's definitely in, unless they can figure out a way to move him out, but is that Newsom's trip to China that he made recently, that's the sort of thing you have to clear with the White House and, frankly, with the DNC, right, the Democratic National Committee. And you get the blessing of the politicos involved, right? And they say, okay, fine, you're going to go meet with the freaking leader of China. You're the governor of California. So that tells me that they are trying to set the table a little bit for a possible. And he also was over in Israel, right? He's and if you're running for president, you better have some foreign policy chops or some experience. So that's what this game is about, right? And the fact that China agreed for the leader, for Xi, to meet with him, also tells you where China falls down and what they would like to see in 2024, right?
Yep.
If not Biden, then by God, they certainly want, somebody more progressive than Biden. Right?
Yeah, and that was going to be my next comment to you, was just, China, this is not classified. China is an adversary to the United States.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, breaking news here.
Okay. That sounds a little hyperbolic, but okay.
Yeah, don't take that for tomorrow's PDB. It just stays here.
That's still breaking news. That's right.
Yeah. No, but it's just really interesting to me because it looks like something that this is what Xi wants, right?
Yeah.
He is making his push for Taiwan. He wants to get that reunification. He would love to do it art of war style, where you don't fire a single bullet,
right?
And you just get it. And
like Hong Kong,
yeah. And something like,
to be fair, they had Hong Kong, but still, what I mean.
Right, but now they've kept it suppressed,
right?
And they can't do anything. And so now, using a term that you like to use, Gavin Newsom to me looks like a useful idiot who's going to take all this money from China and kind of promote China as kind of like that hashtag that's been put out that the world is big enough for both China and the U.S., which China does not believe.
Right. Yeah, no, they look, they have a plan, right? They've drawn up a blueprint, right, for their initiative, which is to then be at the top of the food chain in relatively short order. We're talking years, not decades, basically. So, nothing happens in a bubble in this world, right? It's a shrinking place, right? We're so interconnected, and so the idea that people would kind of look at it from one side and go, well, Gavin Newsom went over and met with the leader of China. You got to look at it the other side and go, well, why would the leader of China want to meet? Because it's not like he hands out meetings all the time to just whoever happens to stop by, right? So it's an important part of the calculation that we have to look at, and it does seem to imply that the DNC and the White House, are looking at this and going, okay, is there a way to hand the baton over, right, without a messy primary, right? And because if that, God forbid, that's not what they want,
right?
I can only imagine how many people would throw their hat in the ring if they thought the runway was clear. So
no, that would be very interesting.
It'd be very interesting. I agree with you. And you know what? It's actually a healthy thing for the country. People always claim, well, I can't believe we've got like 15 people in there running. Why the hell not? We should have a lot more than that, right? We should.
Yeah, this is something that, and I'm say you're moving the conversation along to the way that I want to do it. You're a CIA guy. This is just what you do. You want to make me feel better. Move it exactly how I want it to move along. But I had an opportunity. When was this? Last week, 2 weeks ago. I was in Vegas for the Military Influencers Conference.
Okay.
But very interestingly, Andrew Yang was there to do a fireside chat. He is working with a nonprofit that's Veterans for All Voters. They're trying to get ranked choice voting established state by state. And Andrew's a guy that I really respect. I think he sides on both sides. He's more of a, he's progressive and he's got some ideas that maybe I don't agree with, but there's other things that I really do agree with him. And so he was speaking, and that was one of the things he brought up was he's got the Forward Party. That's a new party. They're not looking for the presidency in 2024. What they're looking for is communities, and then get into the communities, get some Forward Party members elected in the community, and then open it up to it over the years. Is that something that interests you, having that a third party and a fourth party? I think it's good for a republic. It's good for a democracy. The forefathers.
No, I think I'd be hard pressed to find a downside if we had legitimate, third, fourth parties. I mean, again, it's people would argue, well, we've got the Green Party, we've got libertarians. Yeah, you know what? If you look at that, I don't know that they've positioned themselves in any way to ever be meaningful, right? I mean, it's okay, they're there and they'll make some noise and take 2 or 3% of the vote, and that, and that's an important part of the democratic process because they speak to a certain, part of the voting block, and that's good. But yeah, I'd love to see a legit third, fourth party in there. I'd love to see a party that's more centrist, and understands that compromise isn't an evil word, right? You're not always. I mean, how many times do you tell your kid you can't get everything you want? Right?
Yeah,
it's the way the world is, right? But not now. You're sitting in your both sides sit there, and if they can't get everything they want, they're throwing hand grenades, right? So I think that would be great to see something closer to the center ground, right, where nobody seems to live anymore. But we got a primary situation. We got a primary system that rewards the hard edges, right? And that kind of then becomes a self-selecting process as to who makes it to the general elections. So I think until unless we can figure out a way to beat the primary system,
it's a tough one.
It's
a lot of money in there.
Yeah, and money's another part. Unless you can get serious kind of finance reform, you shouldn't need hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, right? You shouldn't need $50 million to run for a Senate seat, right?
Yeah,
and you also shouldn't be able to stay there for life. So, but that's now we're really disappearing down some rabbit holes. So I apologize.
Well, and I always say I don't like to, when I do This Week Explained, our weekly podcast, I don't like to bring politics into it. But I think it's important in this situation because as polarized as we are as a nation, and it really is maybe the most polarized we've ever been as a nation.
Yeah,
that's a national security issue, because then you have two groups of people that are either right wing or left wing who are constantly fighting and nothing is getting done, and you've got other countries who are adversaries to ours that are just salivating. And so I do think it's important.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it is and in part because they are outside foes, right? Countries that aren't aligned with our interests, China in particular, Russia in particular, Iran. They take advantage of this. The fact that we're so divided. They see that and they just encourage it, right? China's got a disinformation campaign or a program, an apparatus, basically spamouflage that they focus on things like racism, right? And they know that's that tears the fabric of the country. So they go in there amplifying racist social media, coverage, and people read it, go, oh my God, and they're not thinking, oh, but this was sent out by the Chinese disinformation apparatus. Right? They're just thinking, hey, damn that other side,
right?
And so yeah, it is a matter of national security. I like that. I like the way you put it because it's absolutely true.
Yeah, and just picking up off of sort of so this happened, I believe it came out in 2021 or 2022, but in 2020, during the height of COVID, I think what was found was there were tens of thousands of Facebook accounts that were created by Russian bots, but they were all competing accounts. So you would have, promoting, I would say good things, like African culture and Native American culture. My wife's Native American. I'll fight for Native American issues all the time. But they had those, and then they had competing ones where it was like white supremacy Facebook posts. It was all run by the same Russian kind of disinformation trolls.
Right. No, they've got the resources, and that makes just perfect sense. You don't, from a tactical perspective, you don't just focus on one thing, right? I mean, you're creating the entire story, right? You're not just pushing one narrative. You're working both sides of the chessboard, right? So if you've got the resources to do that, why wouldn't you do it from a covert action perspective? So
yeah,
it does make sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Matt.
Yeah. I don't want to take, I just want to take maybe an hour. If we go over a little bit, if that's fine with you, we can keep moving on just a little bit. But I do want to get into the Russia-Ukraine talk because I keep saying I think I'm one of the only people that keeps focusing on that Russia-Ukraine. I know you do the same. On this last Rogan episode, you talked a lot about Russia-Ukraine. Very, I was kind of, I don't know. I was taken aback. I didn't think you guys would get into that. And I loved everything that you said about it. It was spot on. It's what I say on this podcast as well. So I just wanted to ask, do you think Zelensky goes to the table? Do we see a peace agreement because of where it stands as a stalemate in that war?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't think he's got much choice, right? The cash is the resources is going to dry up before he gets anywhere near doing what he claimed early on was their objective, which was retaking all the lost territory, including Crimea.
Right.
So, and again, I keep going back to the same thing. Putin, he's drawing a red line. He's not giving up Crimea, right? The only port for his, the Black Sea for his fleet. So, yeah, I don't think there's any way around it. And I think a year ago it would have been impossible, right? Because people were still so excited to wave their Ukrainian flags and talk about how much support. But that time has passed. And I think I think Zelensky is smart enough, and the Ukrainian, authorities are smart enough to read the tea leaves. And so the problem is they really needed to hit this winter time with a win, right? They really need to be kind of going this direction in their counteroffensive. And, they did well. I mean, look, it's who is it for us to say that whether they did well or poorly, right? We're not out there in miserable conditions and fighting a Russian army where Putin has no problem just keep throwing people in there, right? That's the thing that he's got going for it, is he's got a much bigger force, right? And he doesn't care. So I think they balance all of this out, particularly trying to read the tea leaves in Washington, D.C. And I think that they figure out a way, and ultimately, look, Putin's not going to get what he wanted, right? He already realizes that. So he just wants to consolidate where he's at right now, probably, whether that's acceptable. I think if the Ukrainians had been able to move forward and retake some of eastern Ukraine to the degree that they wanted, then I think we could have gotten to the settlement quicker. But saying, you think a settlement is in the works doesn't mean you're pro-Putin. Again, people have to get into that stupid mindset. Saying, well, if you're talking about a settlement, then you're obviously pro-Putin. And meanwhile, those same people will go out and go to a protest, about Gaza.
Also call you a warmonger.
Yeah.
You're trying to stop a war.
Yeah. So I don't know. We live in stupid times, maybe, but yeah. So to answer your question, I think Zelensky will probably head to the table here at some point. There's a little bit of time left, right? Now the danger is if maybe the worst scenario is they go into the winter. There is no talk of a settlement. They just they spend their time and what resources they have trying to hit Russian supply lines. The Russians spend their time just pounding on energy, facilities in Ukraine, trying to freeze them out, and more people suffer. So I don't know. I mean, look, nobody gave a shit when Putin took over Crimea.
Right.
Nobody gave a shit for years when he had soldiers in eastern Ukraine. Right. So don't give me this crap from some of these people who, saying hashtag, Ukraine. You weren't around doing that. You weren't waving your flag years ago. So don't now stand there all self-righteous and say that, maybe they need to figure out a settlement, particularly when, again, at the same time, you're going out there and going, oh, my God, look what Israel's doing. So,
right, yeah. I mean, I agree with everything there. That I try to always caveat the war, Russia-Ukraine war is basically from 2012.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. I mean, nobody cared.
Nobody cared.
Yeah.
But my worry as of right now is, especially with the way that the Israel-Hamas war is going, and I will say Hamas is getting some support. And so, like I said, Russia or Putin is looking at this like, hey, we're pushed to the side, so nobody's going to care what we're going to do. And, oh, by the way, the U.S. is running out of money to give Ukraine. And they're running out of the support of the American people is waning to continue to support the war in Ukraine. So my worry is, on one side, before they go to the table for an agreement, Putin says one more opportunity to take Kiev. And if I can get into Kiev, there's no talk about a peace agreement. I'm just going to take it over. or have the peace agreement, consolidate forces like you talked about along that new border, and then 2-3 years from now, do it again. Because the ultimate goal is to take.
Again, I think you're right. I think that last part is spot on. I don't think Putin, look, he's a semi-rational player. I mean, I think he's gotten his way, and I can't speak to his mental stability from day to day, but I think he's a rational player at this point. I don't think he sees Kyiv as an end point. I don't think he sees Kyiv as something he can do anymore. He's lost too much in the way of command and control. A lot of their leadership structure is shot. He's fired, or some of them have been killed, and resources. He's having to go hat in hand to Iran and North Korea. That probably pisses him off every day. So I don't think that's going to be the case. But does that mean that they come to some settlement and then he doesn't try the same game? In 3 or 4 years, I think that's a definite possibility. But during that interim period, I'm sure NATO will have that in the back of their mind as they're, structuring their forces and worrying about what might come next. But I don't see Putin making a move on Kyiv. I think that's a bridge too far. But look, I mean, there's all sorts of things going on right now. Here in the U.S., we talk about this on the PDB tomorrow, so it's a little bit of a preview. But some members of the Democrat Party, including Bernie Sanders, there's a shock, are saying that any Israel any more aid to Israel needs to be contingent upon setting parameters and setting sort of conditions on Israeli military actions. And you're thinking, yeah, I'm sure that's what the IDF would like to take their operational strategy from Bernie Sanders and Rashida Tlaib and others in the squad. If I was Netanyahu, although he's in a difficult political position, I'd probably say, I tell you what, you keep your aid. We'll worry about what we need to do to survive, and then we can talk after. But, I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, you're right. There is a waning support. And I would argue for Ukraine, it came pretty quick, right? We're 20 years in Afghanistan. I think that fatigue shows in how quick people have become tired with Ukraine, and now how some politicians are, although they've got different motivations and reasons for it, with Israel. So, yeah.
Now, I want to pose a question to you that I did pose to Andrew Yang, but I think and his response was great. I agreed with it, but I think you have a more informed and a better response, because what I'm seeing recently in the last few years is what I would call this waning support for the intelligence community within the United States, from people that at one time, at the height of the global war on terrorism, they loved the intelligence community. They loved the CIA. I mean, you had Sean Hannity getting waterboarded on Fox News to support, what was coming out from CIA black sites, that this isn't torture, it's just what we do. And those same people have now flipped and said, everything that the intelligence community does is a conspiracy theory, and we need to completely do away with. So how do you fix that?
Yeah, you know what? I don't think you do fix it. I think you just continue. I mean, for the IC, right? I mean, if I was the director of the agency, I wouldn't look at it from a how do I fix it perspective. I'd just say, okay, fellas, we have to do what we always do, right? It's a job. We don't care who's in office. And we get our priority tasking, and we go out, we collect the intelligence, we do what we need to do from an operational perspective, and then we do the same thing next time there's a different administration, and the same thing. We just keep marching on. And, look, you can't, because you're implying that somehow you can get ahead of the social media wasteland, right? And I don't know how you do that. So I think for the most part, look, people have a right to be skeptical and cynical, right? You always should be. That's not an unhealthy position to take when you're talking about the intelligence community and federal law enforcement and these other things, right? And you never want a politicized intelligence community, ever. So you should ask questions. And the Senate Intel Committee and Congressional Intel Committees shouldn't be asking questions. Typically, they don't, right? Typically, they know what's going on, and then when something happens and they think that their position is threatened, they just pretend like they didn't hear anything, or they didn't have an opportunity to ask questions. But you need a very curious public, basically, to always, try. And so the degree that you can be transparent. But I wouldn't, again, if I was the director, I would say, look, it's not our job to fix it. We just have to focus on our job, right? Which is ensuring that, national security issues as defined by whoever sits in the White House.
Right.
So anyway,
but that's been my issue. Is it's whoever sits in the White House. So now we're
what I mean by that is it never changes, right? I mean, you go overseas to some fourth world country or third world country, and they rotate people out, right? So I hear somebody like whoever, some pundit out there screaming that we have to just clear it out. We have to fire everybody. I said, okay, Commandante, chill the fuck out, right? That's
Venezuela.
Yeah, that's what you do in a fourth world country, right? You don't clear house every time you get a new leader, right? That's not how you maintain as close to an apolitical organization as possible, right? So anyway, I get the skepticism, and certainly I get it given the way that media and social media work nowadays, right? And how it divides people, polarizes, and plays off those themes, right? And you see someone like Tucker Carlson or Sean Hannity talking to their base, right? Because they're reading the tea leaves and they see, well, my ratings are going to, stay up or improve if I feed that crowd their red meat. And right now we've gotten them into a position where they believe that you can't trust any government organization. So I'm going to keep chucking red meat at them, right? I'm not going to talk reason. I'm not going to say, well, you know what, maybe we overdid the narrative. So I don't know. It doesn't really answer your question, but
no, it really does. That is the answer. Is you just keep trucking along and you keep doing. But does leadership within the agency go out, because you've got that letter that former or retired officers put out, or they've done multiple, and you said apolitical, and they've done multiple political statements for one side. Does the agency kind of take them and say, hey, can we stop that, guys? Or do they just say that they're no longer really affiliated?
Yeah, no longer affiliated. I mean, they're private citizens, right? They can, they've got free speech just like everybody else does. I know some of the people who signed up to that letter, and I know that they feel like, that was a mistake.
Yeah.
But look, Anthony Blinken organized that charge, right? He organized that, through Mike Morrell. And when Mike Morrell, who was very senior and well liked by certainly the people in that letter, when he called as a private citizen, say, look, I'm doing this, and don't you think that, and there's a pressure, right, on those individuals to go, well, it's Mike, he's I worked with him for all those years, he's a buddy, and okay, sign up to it, and then there's also the general feeling like, what harm could it do?
Right. Just put your name on it.
That's right. Without realizing that, Hunter's laptop was just as bad as they were saying it was, even worse. And so, but when I say an apolitical organization, I mean the people there, the people on the streets, the people that work there, right? The analysts, everyone, all those people. Now, of course, you get a director who gets, appointed, right? My feeling has always been the director of the CIA should always come from within the ranks, right?
Yeah.
And now here's where I'm subjective. I always think it should come from within the operational side of things, right? You need to understand how the operations director works at its very core, right? So I love it when you get somebody rising up, as a DDO, and then if they could become, director. I think that's the pathway to take. You don't pull somebody out from somewhere else and say, okay, I want you to be the director of the CIA, because now you're a little bit, your alignment there is shifted towards the White House in a sense, right? And, I think that's not a healthy thing. You want the director to have top cover for the agency, meaning you want them to have an open communication with the White House, but you don't want them to be enamored with the White House. So anyway.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. And Mike, thanks for coming on. I want to give you a few minutes to plug everything that you're doing. You're like the busiest man in intelligence right now.
Well, I'm certainly not the most intelligent, but I am in business.
Keep taking those pills. Get there.
Those pills, I don't know how that worked out. You know what? I appreciate that, man. For all your information and security needs, by God, it's the Portman Group. That company's still taking along. It's been my pride and joy, starting a business and keeping it going and growing it and being able to, hire really smart people certainly smarter than I am, and then see the thing keep living and breathing and growing. We're not taking over the world, but it's a great operation. Some of these folks have been with me for years, and so that's been a real rewarding experience. And then I would just, like you already did graciously, I just plug the President's Daily Brief every weekday. We got a morning edition, we got an afternoon edition. Gives you what you need to know in 20 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, some facts and context, and then we let you get on your way. That's on Spotify and all the other podcast platforms.
Yeah, and I absolutely mean it when I say it. It's a daily listen for me now twice. And what I love about it is when I'm so I only do once a week. I can't do every day. But when I'm putting together what I'm looking at as far as going through all the media sources, doing open source intelligence and everything to get ready for our podcast, you're up talking about the things I'm already looking at. So now I'm getting the perspective from, somebody who was in the CIA. That you're not going to get that everywhere.
Yeah, well,
you'll get it at the PDB.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some great people that work there with the operation that runs at firsttv.com. But the staff there is fantastic. And so, I'm just a tiny cog in that machine, but it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it. I really didn't know much about podcasts. Certainly didn't know what was involved in doing a podcast. But it's been very rewarding, and I appreciate you letting me bang out about it.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe makes it look easy, but
he makes it look very easy, right? Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I hope I didn't take too much of your time.
No, I appreciate you, man. Anytime. Just send me a note, and let's talk about the crap that's going on in the world.
Sounds great. I will take you up on that then. So
excellent.
You're about to see me get annoying. I'm just kidding.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.